The previous basket is under review.
Welcome back to Scout Team. Another episode. We are locking in on the portal. I know a lot of the content throughout the college basketball ecosystem, and particularly the basket under review ecosystem, is portal centric right now. But I think we are hoping to provide yet another different perspective, try to shed the light on some fits that are really good or maybe not so good, and then how teams might evolve their styles to fit their newfound personnel. I'm Kevin Sweeney, joined by Eric Fawcett. We are plugging along. It's been the portal has very much grinded to a halt. There's very little activity now. You're not getting like three big commits an hour anymore, which I'm good with. We've had a month of it, but yeah, it's a good time to actually sink our teeth into where some of these teams are at.
Yeah, as much as there's plenty of portal analysis out there, I'd like to think we have our lane here of seeing exactly how they fit in, both with some of the players on the roster, some of the styles of fits with the coaches. And it was really fun to also talk, especially in the last video, about coaches like Rick Barnes that maybe are signaling a change of style with some of the pickups. I find that to be really interesting. How much do teams go at the players that fit their strengths versus plug holes, or just bring something that is completely different? So that brings a really good element. I think today we're going to largely look at some guys who fit the mold of what these teams have had success with in previous seasons. And I find that really interesting. And again, a couple of guys here that were maybe not like topping everyone's lists of best player. There may be a couple guys in that second tier, but I feel like that's where you get the possibility for value that can make these teams be better than what's expected, is when guys think, oh, this guy's a B level transfer. He plays like an A level transfer, a C minus that plays like a B. So it's a couple interesting players, a couple interesting fits to look at today.
Yeah, let's start with Illinois, which was quiet in the portal for once, really. And they've been a team that has turned over its roster quite a bit in recent years. This year, it's not quite so. They are very retention driven. Their one big portal get, though, was very important, and it was Stefon Vox from Providence. Super talented. I think an NBA talent, potentially, but wasn't on a winning team. I think some questions there. That being said, like, if you were scripting out, okay, how do we who can we find in the portal who can do some of the stuff that Keaton Wagler did, that can do some of the stuff that we really value as a program in terms of like have size, have the ability to shoot off the dribble, have the ability to play make for others. The fit is very natural. And it's not just, oh, here's another European guy that we're like adding to the mix. Like there's a very seamless fit here. And I think the Vox addition for Illinois is a great example of like a win for both sides, where he makes a lot of sense for them, but also like their infrastructure should make his life a lot easier and really boost his stock. Like if you asked me to go through the portal and say, who are some guys that could go from, okay, this is a high level $3 million portal player, and take scale from that to like first round pick next year, I think if things go right, it's Steph Vox. And I think Illinois is the perfect place for him to try to make that leap.
You gave a little bit of that like shoulder shrug when talking about the Wagler NBA prospects. And I kind of feel the same way, because when I watch him, he's not that fast. He's not super deceptive, yet still he just gets to the rim whenever he wants. And then, of course, that was probably aided by the fact that teams were so worried about him just sitting behind a screen and pulling and finishing. But when I watch these like slow drives to the rim, these like straight, like just turns the corner of a pick and gets downhill, just like no one is up to the level of the ball, and he's able to rise up and hit shots. And you're just like, how did this happen? How did Illinois get this? I kind of feel the same way about Vox. And that's where I feel like, again, it's a really interesting fit about a guy who has, I would say, like still like good size, not Wagler length and height, but and also he doesn't have that like blistering first step. He's not super crafty, but like when you watch Providence play, like Vox is just like paint touch. And I think that is going to bring a really good element to that Illinois offense and really replace a lot of what Wagler does. And I think when you watch some of these clips, like, yeah, the movements don't look identical, that's for sure, but like their results are really, really similar. The shooting off the dribble without a lot of creation, the ability to get into the paint without like needing to blow by a guy. That's what I really enjoy watching with Vox, and it's kind of a lot of the things that Wagler did. So it certainly seems like it's going to fit in there. And then the other element that he brings that I feel like he was really underrated was like as a defender, and this is something you get from some of these guys that were grinding out pro leagues when they were 16 with him in the Estonian and Latvian league early, is like his ability to create steals and be a really pesky defender, some of that savviness to hit the roll, which of course is going to be something that they're going to need a whole bunch with the way that the roster is constructed. I think he's going to be a really welcome sign. You see some of the passes like that one, and you just know that a lot of these Illinois bigs are going to be well fed. But again, just getting back to kind of the defensive presence, like, yeah, he's not like an elite athlete who can just like lock down one-on-one. So then he's going to gamble, because I think he kind of knows that he's like, I just can't like sit in front and be and just keep everyone level. He's someone who can be a little bit of a gambler and has incredible anticipation. So I really love that. And I feel like that again is something you do get from a lot of these guys with pro level experience, because when he was 16 starting his pro career, yeah, he probably wasn't going to be able to just like stay in a stance and do everything right. He had to do a little bit of that gambling. So I also feel like in a way that a lot of the styles of play of these Illinois players last year was really endearing to a lot of people. I think there's going to be like a couple of those effort plays, a couple of those really savvy steals, like a little bit of that old man game sometimes getting to the rim. And I think he's going to be really successful there. I also think he's going to be a fan favorite.
Yeah, I think, first of all, Providence's defense was horrible last year. And I think Vox was at times criticized for his effort on that end. I think it's a good example of like the film is probably not as bad as the numbers defensively. And I do think he's too much of a gambler. And I do think there's stuff that he needs to improve there. And like, again, I think it's an area where Illinois as a program can be really good for him, because I do think like, number one, like I think I think they've done a great job of kind of getting it out of guys from an effort standpoint. Brad Underwood is an elite like effort coach, and I think that's something that like they're going to need to do if Vox is going to be really good. I am intrigued kind of generally about whose hands the ball will be in. Will it be Vox a ton? I think Providence at times, like it was a little sticky with him, and I think part of that was just where their roster ended up at points with the injuries that they dealt with. Illinois is not going to do that quite the same. They're going to have Quentin Coleman, who seems like he'll play on the ball some. They have Merck, who I think will play on the ball a lot more as a sophomore than he did as a freshman. So I'm intrigued to see how much is Vox in ball screens versus how much is it the other guys. I do think there'll be a lot more egalitarian though this year. Like Wagler was so high usage and everything else was sort of scripted around him. And I think this year it'll be, here's a little bit of Coleman and a little bit of Vox and a little bit of Merck and a little bit of Stojakovic. And I'm intrigued to see how that all goes. But again, it's a good example where like Vox is a burner. Like Vox can really shoot it from three, especially in catch and shoots. And that was really what they raved about in practice. It's interesting. Like all fall, the conversation at Providence was, man, Vox can shoot. Like this guy is going to be an awesome shooter to space it for Jason Edwards and Jalen Sellers. And then Sellers and Edwards both had some injuries. They both had some struggles. And Vox is like, it's Vox's team now. Here we go. Like go get buckets. And like, I think there's a nice stable floor with Vox of like, okay, even if we decide that Coleman's going to be better on the ball, or we need to put the ball in Stojakovic's hands, he's going to be able to space it and add to their kind of overall dynamic. So I'm bullish on this one. I really am. I know that Vox took a little bit of criticism during that Providence season because of some of the defensive stuff, and again, just a ton being put on his plate. But I believe this is a guy who could play in the NBA one day, and someone that I know scouts are pretty high on. So I think this is a great marriage on both sides.
I think too, as I was, talking about his gambling ability, and you getting excited about it, and then you bringing me back to earth by saying it's maybe a little bit too much. I didn't even think about the kind of something we talked about multiple times through the year, how Illinois was not a very disruptive team defensively. It was not a team that was particularly hard to play against. And just curious to see if they keep the more conservative style, or they're bringing in a little bit of this chaos agent defensively of a guy who, maybe doesn't have the lateral quickness to be a conventional, very good defender, but is someone who can be a little more of a gambler. And I do think also just in time with Illinois generally, just about the fact that we're not always the toughest team to play against defensively. And like I was talking about with Vox, how a lot of these guys that come over from Europe are a little bit more gamblers, a little bit more gamers when it comes to defense, as opposed to kind of traditional defenders. And I also just do wonder if maybe they loosen up the reins a little bit, and then they say, hey, if we're not going to be really elite playing conservatively, like, well, maybe we get all these European guys out there trying to gamble for steals. So I'm not predicting that is for sure, but something I was thinking about as you mentioned that it wasn't always good with Providence's defense. Vox played a role in that, and how exactly that translates, and that'll be kind of big between whether this is like a slam dunk, like 10 out of 10 transfer get, or something lower than that. But like you, I am very high on this edition.
Yeah, agreed. Texas, one of the big winners of the portal cycle, I would say. Obviously, a team that benefited a lot from retention with modest vocatitis. Seems like Dailyn Swain almost assuredly going to the NBA, but Texas will be bigger this year. They have now a true 4-man that's a stud to me in David Punch. We'll show some clips of him, but also the upside swing with Elyjah Freeman on the wing. And Elyjah Freeman is someone that this is a great example of a guy who, he's from South Florida. Miami was recruiting him really hard, and I think he saw what Texas did with Dailyn Swain, and he saw the opportunity to potentially take his game to the next level in the Texas system. And I don't think he'll get the usage that Swain did. Certainly not. They have too many good players. But I think if you're talking about guys who made good decisions for their pro careers, I think Elyjah Freeman could potentially have made himself a lot of money by choosing Texas instead of maybe some of the other options. That's not even a knock on some of the other options. I just think with the way that Texas's roster is built, he has a real opportunity to do some of the Swain type stuff, driving it downhill.
Yeah, so when it starts with kind of like Punch, I think he really made a name for himself with this ability as a bit of an undersized guy to play that real like traditional power forward role that a lot of like college basketball fans really love, the true power forward that's kind of become extinct in a lot of levels. But he's got that ability to play with his back to the basket and pick on some different matchups, because a lot of teams aren't playing they're not equipped to guard a lot of post-ups from the 4. Now, Texas is a team that actually posted up a ton, but as you watch a lot of these clips, like, it was almost all vocatitis. Like they posted up a ton. If you were to look at their usage and their offense, you would say, hey, they post up a ton. Get a post-up guy like David Punch, that makes sense. However, it is a little bit different just because their post-up numbers are really, really large, but it was almost all from the 5. So exactly how they kind of incorporate a more post-up 4, who he kind of plays alongside the 5, will be really interesting. But you also mentioned Swain. I mean, this is someone that, like, I actually do need to give NBA draft Twitter credit, because they were talking about Dailyn Swain when I was like, I'm not sure this guy is it. And then I watched his ability to score in isolation, and some of these just one-on-one takes are absolutely brutal for defenders. And I thought his game turned really, really good in his ability to score one-on-one. And the way that Miller allowed him to do that, space the floor, that he could pick on some matchups, was really impressive. And I definitely don't think that Freeman is at that level, but he's got a little bit of that isolation, downhill driving ability from that 3-4 length kind of position where, again, there's some defenders that are put in these spots that are really, really uncomfortable. And as you watch some of these clips from Freeman, you're like, okay, like Swain was doing a little bit of that stuff. Again, not quite the same level as a Swain, who's like, a lot of people like, this might be one of the best isolation players in the draft, but still, I mean, his ability to create on the wing, maybe not as shifty as Swain, but maybe even a little bit more explosive with that first step. And what I really like about Freeman on a take like that, the way he's able to stampede off the ball. So as much as it's he can score in isolation, but he doesn't just need to bounce the ball 100 times, which is maybe some of the criticism of a Swain. Look at the way he just uses advantages by stampeding right off the catch. He's in the paint before his defender even knows what's happening. So this is something that I know we talked about this a little bit actually with BYU, who I thought brought a little bit to that NBA influence with being really good with the stampedes off the ball. It is something that you see all the time at the pro level. Don't always see it at the college level. I love it when I see it, and Freeman does it. So really, really, really excited about that one. So to me, it's with Texas, I think the Freeman pickup is fantastic, and the Punch one is just interesting to me. I'm curious to see, and I'm sure you'll weigh in here, what the 5 will actually kind of look for them. They had a ton of success with all those post spins with the 5, which really required really spacing things out. So it's conceptually, it's a post up guy for a team that posted up a lot. but from a different position. How that works, that'll be interesting.
I love some of the ancillary stuff that Punch does. I love the defense, the rim protection on the weak side. You saw a lot of those on those post pins. You saw the 4-man being the guy to throw the pass over the top. I think Punch is a really underrated passer. I think he'll be great in that context. I do think this is probably an example of like a guy he's from Texas. This is a monster portal guy that wanted to stay in the state, wanted to get paid. This may be more of like a fit based on geography and connection than it is based on basketball. But I love the optionality it gives them because, again, they can still play small. They picked up Mikey Lewis, and Goosby's an incredible freshman, and Elyjah Johnson. Like, they can go small and play Freeman at the 4 at times if they want to. I could see Punches like an occasional small ball 5. I do think his perimeter skills continue to develop. He's physical. He's tough. I think he'll be great for their defense, especially with the way team. I think you'll see them maybe play a little bit more, play a little bit bigger, more traditionally big. Sean Miller has done that a lot, dating back to Arizona. Like, they were always pretty big. So I'm not super concerned about the fit, but I do think they'll have to play a little bit differently than they did this past year. All right. Wanted to go to Nebraska. Speaking of teams that just like plugged and played something that worked. I mean, Nebraska shooting bigs were a huge part of why they were so good this past year. They got 2 of the best ones in the portal. Bowden Kapke from Boston College had a nice year, but I'm really high on Sam Orm from Belmont. He's a really good player. Huge fan of what he brought to the table for that Belmont team. He's someone that I think has gotten a lot of credit for the shooting. I think when you watch Sam Orm on film, you're impressed with a lot of the other stuff and not just the shooting. He can obviously make shots, but he's tough, he's skilled, he's smart. I think these 2 guys will really help the Nebraska front court.
Yeah, well, I think when you talk about like bigs that can shoot, oftentimes it's like guys that can just like stand out there and start launching with their feet set. And like, yeah, there's some value in that. But when you look at the way that especially like a rink mass was used, like they were like Nebraska was straight up like running him off pin downs, running him off staggers. Like they were using him as an actual wing shooter. And like, yeah, he pick and popped a little bit, but they like really use their bigs to really shoot. And I think that's where looking at like what they should go after with some of their bigs, it's like, yeah, they probably don't just need guys that can catch with their feet set. They need some like movement shooters. And that's where you watch Orm and you're like, this guy's like flying off screens, off pin downs, like flares, getting his feet set in the corner from a really tough angle and, quick release, high release, just like a legit shooter. I feel like sometimes you see these bigs that get to take a bunch of wide open ones, then they hit average or slightly above average, and it's like, wow, look how good they can shoot the ball. But it's like, are they like actual shooters, or are they just like good for big men? And I think Orm really brings that. Kapke is a little bit more of your just like traditional stationary shooter, which still has some value, but you can see too how Nebraska would look at these types of situations and say, okay, we need one of these shooters. Now I do need to note this. So Kapke is someone who, again, has good 3-point percentages. He shot really, really poorly on pick and pop threes. And so he really struggled in these situations where he had to go and get his feet set. He shot well below 20%. And as Nebraska pick and pops their big so much, I look at some of that poor footwork, and I think that definitely needs to be cleaned up. And then I look at Orm, and Orm just does everything while shooting the ball. Like I saw him shooting off screens, now watching him pick and pop. Like, it is very clear to me that he is going to shoot the ball very well. And in a lot of settings, he's the guy I'm kind of really looking at to be the elite shooter. Kapke, we'll see. And then I do just think the question is going to be like, how do these guys hold up on the defensive end in the Big Ten with so much size? Now, I mean, I don't fault Nebraska for going after these 2 guys. I mean, like, we know that size is tough to get. It's expensive. You especially if you're Nebraska, you know the way you want to play and what you want to go after. And they went after skill. They went after shooting. I think that it'll be interesting to see some of the defensive stuff and how that works out to like fully see how this rotation of guys works. But it's just like very clear. I think if we were doing like a portal combine and you and I were just like watching film together and we're like, okay, well, like, where do these guys fit? Like, I think we might have mocked them to Nebraska. So I think that certainly fits, but I'm going to say like Kapke is someone who shoots the ball well with his feet set, struggles to make shots off any level of movement, pick and pop. That's one that, we'll see how it goes. He's got a little bit more traditional size, and then, Orm, someone without the level of traditional size, but I just believe in the shooting 100%. It'll be interesting, but yeah, with two similar players, I feel like they will get the skill that they want from that position.
Yeah, and again, I think they were aggressive on Drew Fielder, who is probably the best like shooting big in the portal, if you will, and that was clearly something they prioritized. But look, at the end of the day, the biggest win for Nebraska was retaining Sanford and Frager, and then now they can kind of build around them. They also added Damon Wilkinson, who's maybe more traditional 5 from South Dakota State. I could see him pushing Kapke. I think Kapke, the pick and pop stuff is very interesting. But I think again, a guy who has some shooting ability and has some toughness, like there's really hard to find. So I think it makes sense what they wound up doing, even though, as you said, he's by no means a perfect player. So, all right, last one we wanted to talk about was we're staying in the Missouri Valley up transfer world with Jaquan Johnson from Bradley. Nothing can prepare you, Iowa State fans, to see Jaquan Johnson in person for the first time, because I've just literally never seen a body like this in college basketball. He is so short. He is so muscular. His nickname Bully is well earned. And he did a lot of that in the Valley. He just kind of took people's lunch money and was tougher than everybody else, could get to the rim. The physical tools limit him. And I do think that he's probably someone that was probably best as like a mid-major superstar, but he brings like all the intangibles that I think Iowa State really values as a point of attack defender, as a leader, as a guy who can make plays for others, and a guy who can score it a little bit. Taman Lipsey obviously departing. Iowa State needed a point guard. They got one in Jaquan Johnson.
Yeah, I mean, Johnson is going to be impossible not to cheer for. And we see the success that Iowa State has had with their point guards. I think Johnson's going to be well positioned to do really well. And I think when you look at what Iowa State really wants, like they really like their true point guards. Like Taman Lipsey, the more I watch, the more like, yeah, he comes off every ball screen with his head up, like looking to pass as his first, second, third, fourth option. And that's really impressive. And it's also really important because in the Big 12, you see so much of that really, really aggressive pick and roll coverage. And you need someone that can navigate all these traps and all these hedges. So that'd be something important to know with Johnson. But that is something that, that is something to watch for him. And when you look at Johnson as a pick and roll playmaker, again, you might now be seeing his frame for the first time, at least here on film. But yeah, someone who is very fearless getting to the rim, and that pressure he puts on the rim then allows him to be a passer, not like the elite of the elite playmaker, but certainly willing. And he is someone who stresses defenses with his downhill ability. And he's got like nice touch on those lobs, nice recognition to be able to get passes through tight windows. And that you can kind of definitely see where Iowa State looks at that and says like, oh, this is this is something that could work. And he also has the ability to get to the rim. And I think that that's something when you look at a lot of smaller point guards, you're like, okay, well, that's the fear is, do they put any pressure on the rim? And with that physicality, with that quickness, like he is trying to get into the paint. He is trying to take contact. He is trying to finish. And that becomes something that makes him really successful. I love watching these clips where like, yeah, it might take a couple of dribbles, but like he's getting to the rim, he's bumping guys off, he's scoring. So that's going to be really big. Now, I note this, Kevin, like all these Valley games, all these teams play really, really aggressive drop. And that is one kind of, so that is the one thing I'm maybe a little bit concerned about going to the Big 12. Can he handle all of these situations with all this aggressive coverage? And then you mentioned him taking people's lunch money. Like this is where he is so fun to watch. The amount of steals he comes up with, the way he comes with steals. He's got one of those like magnetic abilities where like I don't know if it's because of the small stature, but like there are times where he makes plays out of absolutely nowhere, and then there's times where guys like throw him the basketball and he catches it on his chest with two hands, and he just it's miraculous. But he certainly makes up for some of that lack of size with the anticipation, with the toughness, with these quick hands. But really fun to guard, or really fun to watch guard. And I think again he's going to really endear himself to Iowa State fans by all the times he like hits the floor, diving for loose balls, creating steals. But yeah, offensively, I mean, it's going to be an interesting translation. But I think that would be the number one thing I'm kind of curious about is like he played a lot of drop coverage in the Valley and got to do whatever he wanted, getting that powerful frame going downhill, using that pulp ability. He's going to have to navigate some traps, some hard hedges, some stuff he has not seen a whole lot of.
Yeah, I also think there's a world where Killian Toure ends up being the starting point guard at Iowa State. I think Johnson's the favorite, but I think there's a world where Toure, they prove that he's just like he's best with the ball in his hands because of the lack of shooting, and that would make it hard for Johnson because he's not going to play off the ball. He's gonna have to pound it some. But I do love. I just he's one of those guys that's just so easy to bet on because he's so tough. He took this massive leap. He's a monster analytically, partially because of all the steals. But yeah, I think like the floor to me is like, man, this guy is just like an absolute pest on the ball coming off the bench. And the ceiling is starting point guard in the Big 12. And I do think he has, there's a lot there. I'm a big believer in Jaquan Johnson, even if, again, like, I don't know that he will be better offensively than Lipsy, but like Lipsy got his limitations on that end of the floor. So I'm curious to see, can he or Toure elevate the Iowa State offense a little bit with the ball in hand stuff? Now, again, having to balance out not having Jefferson, not having Momcilovic. But I do think there was more to be had from the point guard offensively, even as good as Lipsy was as a playmaker, as a table setter, as a leader, etc. So, yeah, I'm excited to watch Iowa State. They did their work early as always. So, good stuff as always. We will be back with more Portal Fits soon. Thanks for watching Scout Team. Subscribe to Basket Under Review.